"Your daughter is alive. She is in mortal danger." The shrill voice of Edgar the Raven echoed through the silent mansion, shattering Magnate Arthur's forced mourning. He froze, the portrait of little Clara, his missing daughter, trembling in his hands. The bird's piercing gaze, always loyal, now carried a desperate urgency, a truth Arthur refused to accept. His chest tightened with overwhelming hope and icy terror as Edgar flapped his wings frantically, pointing to a dark corner of the room. And what he revealed next would shatter Arthur's world, exposing the vilest betrayal he had ever imagined. The raven, with a hoarse cry, flew to the ancient fireplace, landing on the marble mantelpiece. With its beak, it nudged an almost invisible carving in the wood beside it. Arthur, stunned, followed the movement. His fingers found a protrusion, a hidden button, which gave way with a soft click. A section of the wood moved, revealing a dark, secret compartment. Arthur held his breath. With trembling hands, he plunged his fingers into the hole, fumbling for something soft and familiar. He pulled out a small, worn rag doll, Clara's favorite. The doll still carried his daughter's faint, childish scent. His eyes welled up, a sob escaped. Edgar, with another cry, pointed to the back of the compartment. Arthur discerned a folded piece of paper. Carefully, he picked it up. It was a small drawing by Clara, a colorful flower and a smiling sun. On the back, in elegant, cold handwriting, a single sentence. "She is safe, Arthur, don't worry." The signature was a stylized V. Veronica. His wife's name echoed in Arthur's mind, cold and sharp as a blade. His blood seemed to freeze in his veins. It was all a charade, orchestrated by the woman who shed crocodile tears on his shoulder. Arthur clutched the drawing to his chest. The hope Edgar had ignited now came with overwhelming fury. Pain had blinded him. Trust had betrayed him. He raised his eyes to Edgar, who watched him with almost human intensity, seeming to understand the turmoil. With a nod, Edgar flew to the window, landing on the sill and looking out, indicating a path. Arthur stood up, his posture, previously bowed by grief, now rigid with determination. His fists were clenched, veins throbbing in his temples. Clara's image in the portrait and the doll in his hands were irrefutable proof of the betrayal. Veronica had not only hidden Clara, but had also deceived and manipulated him. That stylized V, once a symbol of love, was now the mark of the deepest betrayal. Guilt gave way to urgency. He needed to find Clara. Edgar, with another call, flapped his wings and flew out the window, disappearing into the twilight darkness. Arthur didn't hesitate. He knew the raven was his only guide, his only true ally on this uncertain journey. With Clara's doll in his hands, he headed for the door, a new purpose in his eyes. The mansion felt like a prison. He was determined to free his precious daughter. His love for Clara propelled him. Arthur opened the mansion door with an impetus he hadn't felt in a long time. The cold night air hit him, but he barely noticed. His eyes scanned the darkness, searching for Edgar. The raven, faithful and silent, waited on the highest branch of an ancient oak that shadowed the entrance. Seeing Arthur, Edgar let out a low caw, almost a summons, and took flight, plunging into the gloom. Arthur ran, Clara's doll still clutched in his hand, his heart beating a frantic rhythm of hope and fear. The mansion, once his refuge, now felt like a gilded cage from which he needed to escape. Every step was driven by Clara's image, her smile, her bright eyes. Veronica's betrayal was an open wound, but the urgency of finding his daughter superseded any pain. He couldn't fail. Not after everything Edgar had revealed. The raven flew ahead, not too fast, as if it knew Arthur needed to follow on foot. Its movements were calculated, a mysterious dance in the night sky, guiding Arthur through the estate's labyrinthine gardens. Suddenly, Edgar landed in a dense bush, hidden behind an ancient statue, and looked back at Arthur with an intensity that left no doubt. Arthur approached, confused. There was no path there. The raven then poked the ground with its beak, scratching the earth. Arthur knelt, feeling the damp earth. his fingers touched something hard and cold. It was a small, rusty key, almost imperceptible among the roots. An old key, which he recognized. It was the key to the small service gate that led to the most isolated part of the estate, a place Veronica always avoided. With the key in hand, Arthur felt a shiver. Veronica had hidden the key there, perhaps to gain access unnoticed, or to keep someone imprisoned. A wave of nausea hit him, but he repelled it. It was not a time for weakness. He found the gate hidden by vegetation, and the key turned with a painful creak. The gate opened, revealing a narrow, forgotten path, flanked by tall, twisted trees. As Arthur slipped through the gate, Veronica, in her luxurious bedroom, felt a strange chill. She was sitting at her dressing table, admiring her reflection, the mask of false sorrow perfectly in place. A faint noise from downstairs made her lift her head. She frowned. Arthur should have been in his study, drowned in his usual melancholy. But the mansion's silence felt different, denser, more charged. A dark premonition began to form in her chest, a small crack in her armor of control. She stood up, the silk of her robe rustling against the floor, and walked to the door, opening it slightly, peering into the dark corridor. Nothing, just emptiness. Arthur, oblivious to Veronica's brief unease, followed Edgar. The raven flew low now, almost brushing the leaves of the trees, leading him to the most remote part of the vast estate, a place Arthur rarely visited. With each step, the hope of finding Clara mingled with the pain of betrayal and fury against Veronica. He felt like a fool, blinded by his own pain, manipulated by the one he swore to love. But guilt would not paralyze him. His love for Clara was an inextinguishable fire, and he would find her no matter the cost. Edgar was his beacon in the darkness, and Arthur trusted him with every fiber of his being. The path became steeper, the vegetation denser, but Arthur didn't stop. He knew he was very close. Arthur felt his heart pound, an incessant drum of anxiety and hope. The dense vegetation scratched his clothes, but he barely noticed. Every leaf whispered Clara's name, a melody of urgency and love. Edgar, his winged guide, flew ahead, a dark silhouette cutting through the faint light filtering through the treetops. The air was heavy, damp, the smell of wet earth mingling with night-blooming flowers. Arthur breathed deeply, his mind haunted by Veronica's image, her cold smile and calculating eyes. The pain of betrayal was intense, but hope propelled him. The long-forgotten path became narrow, winding between thorny bushes and ancient trees. Edgar, with a discreet core, landed on a low branch, pointing to a structure almost swallowed by foliage. It was a small stone house, old and forgotten, an abandoned gardener's annex. Its windows were dark, and the wooden door seemed about to collapse, corroded by time. Arthur approached cautiously, Clara's doll still clutched in his hand. The silence was almost deafening, broken by the rustling of leaves and his racing heart. Edgar flew to the roof of the small house, observing him with keen eyes. There was no light, no sign of life, but an echo of innocence hung in the air. Someone was there. Arthur felt a chill, a mixture of fear and hope. Could it be Clara? So close after so much agony? Meanwhile, in the mansion, Veronica couldn't shake the unsettling feeling, a premonition that intensified. The silence deepened, and Arthur's absence from his study disturbed her. She descended the stairs, the silk of her robe swaying. The main hall was empty, the fireplace unlit, the darkness denser. Her eyes swept the room, stopping at Clara's portrait. A sneer almost formed, but she suppressed it. She needed to maintain the facade. Veronica walked to the window, peering into the darkness of the gardens, her mind searching for an explanation. Nothing. Just the usual night. But then, a small sliver of light, almost imperceptible, caught her attention. It came from the most remote part of the estate, from the old gardener's annex. That made her freeze. No one should be there. An icy dread spread through her chest, cracking her armor of control. Arthur would never go there willingly, unless someone had led him. Back at the annex, Arthur stood before the door, his breath caught. The wood was swollen, the lock rusty. He tried the doorknob, but it was locked, yielding a metallic creak. Edgar, from the rooftop, let out a caw, then flew to a small side window, almost covered by ivy, and poked the glass with his beak. Arthur noticed that a piece of the glass was broken, a tiny opening. He approached, and peering through the hole, his heart leaped. Inside, on the dusty floor, was a small teddy bear belonging to Clara, dirty and forgotten, but undeniably hers. Tears welled up in Arthur's eyes, uncontrollable. Clara was there. He knew it. His fury against Veronica intensified, mingling with overwhelming relief. He needed to break down that door, reach her. With a cry of determination, Arthur stepped back, preparing to force his way in. His love for his daughter was his strength. Nothing would stop him from rescuing her. The truth was about to be revealed. Arthur stepped back, body tense. With the force of fury and love, he charged at the old door. The wood groaned, cracked, but didn't give way. He tried again, shoulder against the rotten wood, muscles burning. The hollow sound filled the night. Finally, with a dry crack, the door gave way, swinging inward with a crash, raising ancient dust and a smell of abandonment. The darkness was almost total. A pale beam of moonlight entered through the broken window. The smell of mold was strong, but Arthur ignored it. His eyes swept the room, boxes, rusty tools, and in the corner, huddled on a worn blanket, a small figure. Clara. His heart stopped, then raced with overwhelming hope and inextinguishable love. Clara. Arthur's voice came out hoarse, almost a whisper. The girl lifted her head, her large, frightened eyes still blurred with sleep. She blinked, trying to recognize the imposing figure in the doorway. Her lips trembled. "Daddy!" Her voice was a thread, fragile and full of uncertainty. Arthur ran, kneeling beside her. He reached out, hesitant, afraid. It wasn't a mirage. Clara was there, real. Alive, he pulled her into a tight embrace, feeling the warmth of her small body, the scent of her hair. The tears, previously of fury, were now of pure relief, wetting his daughter's face. He held her close, as if he never wanted to let her go. The rag doll fell. Edgar, from the rooftop, let out a soft caw, almost a coo, sharing the relief and joy of that reunion. His eyes, which had seen so much evil, now witnessed the beauty of paternal love. In the mansion, Veronica felt a shiver. The noise coming from the annex, the sound of splintering wood, reverberated in her mind. She ran to the window, eyes fixed on the open door. An icy chill ran down her spine. Arthur, he had found out. Her face contorted in panic. Her plans, her fortune, everything was at risk. She needed to act, fast. The fear of being exposed consumed her. Arthur pulled back slightly, holding Clara's face. His eyes scanned every detail of his daughter, looking for any sign of harm. She was pale, with dark circles under her eyes, but seemed unharmed. "Are you all right, my love? Did she hurt you?" Arthur's voice trembled. Clara shook her head, eyes welling up. "I was scared, Daddy. Very scared. It's over, my love. Daddy's here. I'll never leave you alone again." He lifted her into his arms, feeling her familiar weight. Fury against Veronica burned, but Clara was the priority. Edgar descended from the roof, landing on Arthur's shoulder. With his beak, he gently nudged Clara's hair, a gesture of affection and protection. "We need to get out of here, Clara," Arthur whispered, looking into the darkness. The mansion with Veronica was a danger. He needed to take her to a safe place, away from that cruel woman. Justice would come, but first, his daughter's safety. He turned, with Clara in his arms and Edgar on his shoulder, ready to face whatever came. Arthur held Clara tight against his chest, his daughter's warmth a balm. Edgar on his shoulder, his determination. The darkness, a protective veil. He needed to get her out of there, from that home now a trap. His fury against Veronica solidified, but his love for Clara was a shield. In the mansion, Veronica rushed down the stairs, her heart pounding erratically. The sound of the annex door splintering echoed, revealing the failure of her plan. Her eyes, once ambitious, now gleamed with fear. Arthur had found the girl. That cursed raven. She clenched her fists. She couldn't allow Arthur to escape. Her fortune, position, everything depended on that secret. Arthur, with Clara in his arms, moved with agility. Edgar flew ahead, a dark speck indicating the safe path. Clara, frightened, clung to her father. "Daddy, where are we going?" she whispered. Arthur kissed her head. "Away from here, to a safe place." He felt her trembling and promised that Veronica would never touch her. Veronica reached the back door, pulling on a coat. She needed to intercept them before they reached the estate's boundaries. She knew of a shortcut, less visible, that led to the main road. Her thoughts were muddled, a mix of rage and despair. How had that raven managed it? How had Arthur, blinded by grief, seen the truth? The humiliation was unbearable. Arthur and Edgar followed a narrow, almost invisible trail. The raven flew lower, brushing the branches, ensuring Arthur wouldn't get lost. Arthur felt the weight of responsibility and the lightness of a dissipated burden, the false mourning. The reality, painful due to the betrayal, was a relief. Clara was alive. That was all that mattered. Suddenly, Edgar let out a sharp caw, a warning. He flew higher, circling. Arthur stopped, his heart startled. Hasty footsteps and breaking branches came from the opposite direction. Veronica. He recognized her by her perfume. His eyes widened. She was coming after them. "Daddy, what is it?" Clara cringed. "Shh, my love. Stay quiet," Arthur whispered, holding her tighter. He hid behind a thick tree trunk, shielding Clara. Veronica rushed past, her face contorted by haste and fury, without noticing them. She was heading for the main road, assuming they would escape that way. Arthur waited until Veronica's footsteps faded. Edgar descended, landing on Arthur's shoulder, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. The raven had read Veronica's movements, anticipating her route. Arthur felt profound gratitude for his winged friend. They had narrowly escaped. "She didn't catch us, my love," Arthur said, kissing her forehead. "Edgar saved us again." The girl looked up at the raven, a small smile appearing on her pale lips. "Thank you, Edgar," she murmured. Arthur followed Edgar along a different, winding path, away from Veronica's route. The escape was just the beginning. The journey to justice would be long and painful, but with Clara in his arms and Edgar by his side, he was ready. The bond between them, forged in pain and truth, was unbreakable. Arthur walked with new purpose, Clara in his arms, a reminder of his responsibility and love. Edgar flew in circles, a vigilant guardian. Arthur knew he couldn't return to the mansion nor hide. Veronica was cunning, her influence vast. He needed a plan and allies. His first instinct was to seek out old Thomas, his trusted lawyer and friend. Thomas was a man of integrity, had always advised him, and would surely help him expose Veronica. Arthur mentally mapped a route, avoiding main roads, to Thomas's house a few miles away. It would be exhausting, but Clara's safety was his priority. With each step, Arthur felt his body weary, but adrenaline kept him alert. Clara, exhausted, had fallen asleep in his arms, her serene face contrasting with the turmoil. Edgar, sensing his fatigue, landed on his shoulder, a touch of encouragement. The raven seemed to understand the complexity, not just the escape, but the battle that would follow. They arrived at Thomas's house in the early hours of the morning, before sunrise. The charming cottage, with its well-kept garden, was enveloped in silence. Arthur approached the door, hesitating. How would he explain everything? The story of a talking raven and a treacherous wife would sound like delirium, but he had to try. He knocked on the door, softly at first, then more firmly. No answer. He tried again, his heart heavy. "Thomas? It's me, Arthur." Silence was the only reply. A chill ran down his spine. Something was wrong. Thomas was an early riser. Edgar, who had flown to the living room window, let out an uneasy caw. Arthur approached, peering through the crack. The living room was in perfect order, but there was an envelope on the coffee table bearing his company's seal. Beside it a note. The handwriting was Thomas's. Arthur forced the window, which was unlocked, and entered with Clara in his arms, followed by Edgar. He picked up the note. His eyes scanned the lines, and the world seemed to spin. Thomas had written that he needed to travel urgently, at Veronica's request, to resolve a family matter in another country. He regretted not being able to say goodbye, but Veronica had insisted on urgency and discretion. A knot formed in Arthur's throat. Veronica had anticipated his moves, isolating him from his only ally. She had not only betrayed him, but was weaving a web of lies and manipulations that left him with no apparent escape. The note was cold, calculating proof of the extent of her cruelty. Arthur held Clara close, feeling the weight of that new and terrible reality. The journey for justice would be much harder than he had imagined. Arthur felt Thomas's note crumple in his hands, the thin paper a testament to the web of lies Veronica had woven. Clara slept deeply in his arms, oblivious to the new layer of despair that enveloped her father. Edgar, on Arthur's shoulder, let out a low caw as if sharing the weight of that unexpected blow. Arthur looked at his daughter, her angelic and serene face, and a new wave of determination, stronger than fear, swept over him. He couldn't give in to panic. Veronica had anticipated his move, but not his unwavering love for Clara. He needed to think clearly. Thomas's house, which should have been a safe haven, now proved to be a dead end. Veronica, with her calculating and cruel mind, would surely imagine he would seek out the lawyer. Staying there would be an unacceptable risk to Clara's safety. Arthur walked to the window, peering into the still dark street. The sun was beginning to rise on the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of pink and orange, an almost cruel contrast to the darkness that weighed on his heart. "We need to go, my love," he whispered to Clara, kissing her soft hair. She stirred slightly, a faint sigh escaping her lips, but didn't wake. Arthur held her tighter against him. Where to go? Who else could help? His other contacts were superficial, business-related, and he feared Veronica had already extended her tentacles to them too. The feeling of isolation was suffocating, almost paralyzing. Meanwhile, in the mansion, Veronica was in a frenzy. The rising sun, streaming through the windows, illuminated her face, contorted by rage and fear. The annex door, shattered and wide open, was irrefutable proof that Arthur had discovered everything and rescued the girl. She had underestimated the Raven and Arthur's determination. Her plan, so meticulously built over months, was crumbling before her eyes. "Idiot! How could he have found out?" she cursed, pacing back and forth in her luxurious room, her fists clenched. She picked up the phone, dialing a number with fingers trembling with fury and anxiety. "He fled with the girl," she said, her voice low and urgent, almost a hiss. "Yes, the Raven, that stupid animal. He guided him. I need you to find them. Don't let him reach anyone, especially the press. And Thomas, make sure he doesn't come back anytime soon." Veronica hung up the phone, her face pale and strained. Initial panic gave way to a cold and calculating resolve. She wouldn't lose everything, not to Arthur and that child. She had resources, influence, and wouldn't hesitate to use them. Arthur's fortune was hers by right, or so she believed with a sick conviction. The image of Clara, free and with her father, was an affront she could not tolerate. Back at Thomas's cottage, Arthur felt an icy shiver run down his spine. The feeling of being hunted was palpable, almost physical. He couldn't risk Clara's safety for another second. He needed a place where they could hide, a place Veronica would never imagine, a refuge forgotten by time and people. His eyes swept the room, stopping at an old, dusty bookshelf. An old volume, a guide to mountain trails and camping, caught his attention. He picked it up, carefully leafing through the yellowed pages. An idea began to form in his mind, risky, but perhaps the only hope. There was an abandoned hunting lodge, a simple, rustic cabin in the mountains that had belonged to his family for generations, a place so remote and forgotten that even he hadn't visited it in years. Veronica, for sure, wouldn't know of its existence. "That's where we're going, my love," Arthur whispered, stroking Clara's hair. Edgar on his shoulder let out a soft caw, almost a coo, as if approving the decision. It would be a difficult journey without luxuries or comforts, but it would be a sanctuary. Family, human connection, overcoming all obstacles. These values were now his unwavering guide. Arthur knew the cabin would offer more than just a roof. It would offer time to think, to plan the next steps, and above all, to protect his daughter. He stood up, fatigue still present in his muscles, but hope renewed in his heart. The fight would be long and painful, but he had Clara and Edgar, and that was all that mattered. Arthur, with Clara asleep in his arms and Edgar nestled on his shoulder, left Thomas's cottage before the sun was high in the sky. The decision to go to the mountain cabin, though risky, seemed the only way out. The trail, once familiar from his few visits in youth, now presented itself as a monumental challenge. It was steep, covered with damp leaves and intertwining branches, making every step difficult for the magnate, accustomed to the comfort of Persian rugs. The morning air, fresh and damp, carried the scent of wet earth and pine, a constant reminder of the wild nature surrounding them, so different from the controlled environment of his mansion. Clara, despite her deep sleep, occasionally stirred, a small whimper escaping her rosy lips. Arthur held her tighter, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also the indescribable lightness of having his daughter back, alive. His muscles ached, and fatigue began to settle deep in his bones. But the image of Veronica's face, contorted in fury and cruelty, was a fuel that kept him from stopping, a reminder of what was at stake. Edgar, with his peculiar intelligence, flew ahead for a few meters, then returned, landing on Arthur's shoulder, as if checking they were on the right path and offering a touch of encouragement. His dark, gleaming eyes seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, the urgency of their escape. The journey lasted for hours, and the sun was already high overhead, casting golden rays through the treetops when Arthur felt exhaustion hit him more intensely. He stopped under the cool shade of an ancient oak, carefully sitting on a moss-covered rock so as not to wake Clara. She was still asleep, an angel in his arms, and Arthur took the opportunity to observe her face, looking for signs of any trauma, but finding only the innocence and fragility of childhood. He kissed her forehead, feeling a love so deep it ached, a silent promise of eternal protection. Meanwhile, in the mansion, Veronica gave no quarter, her face pale and her eyes flashing with rage. Her henchmen, men of little morals and much loyalty to money, scoured every corner of the estate and its surroundings, following her relentless orders. She was on the phone, her voice icy and authoritative, demanding immediate results. "I don't care what it costs, find them. He can't have gone far with the girl, and make sure no one, absolutely no one, knows about this." The fear of losing her influence, and especially Arthur's vast fortune, made her even more ruthless and dangerous. She imagined Arthur seeking help in obvious places, and so her men focused their search on nearby roads and towns. The mountain cabin, a place so remote and forgotten by everyone, was completely off her radar, a flaw in her meticulous plan. Arthur, oblivious to the intensity of the pursuit, stood up, feeling the stiffness in his legs and weariness in every fiber of his being. He needed to continue, each step a victory against fatigue. The cabin wasn't far now. He could feel the change in the air, the stronger scent of wood and damp earth, indicating the proximity of the denser, wilder forest. Edgar, sensing the resumption of the journey, let out an encouraging caw and took flight again, leading the way with his characteristic agility. Finally, at dusk, as the sky began to paint itself with shades of purple and orange, the cabin came into view. Hidden among leafy trees, it seemed a part of the mountain itself, almost swallowed by vegetation. It was rustic, with dark wooden walls and a moss-covered roof, dusty windows and some loose porch planks. It wasn't the luxury of the mansion, but it was a refuge, a sanctuary of peace. Arthur approached, his heart beating with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, dusty interior, smelling of abandonment and distant memories. He gently placed Clara on an old sofa covered by a dusty sheet, and she, for an instant, opened her eyes. "Daddy?" Her voice was a sleepy whisper, laden with a fragility that broke Arthur's heart. "We're safe, my love," Arthur replied, stroking her hair tenderly. "We're in our cabin, in the mountains. No one will find us here." He felt relief flood him, mingled with the pain of the reality that had forced them into that exile, but the gratitude for having Clara by his side was immense. Edgar landed on the window, observing the horizon with his piercing eyes, a silent and vigilant guardian. Night fell, bringing with it a promise of darkness, but also of temporary safety. Arthur lit a small lantern, its faint light revealing the rustic simplicity of the place. A cold fireplace, furniture covered with sheets, the promise of a home, albeit temporary. He knew life there would be difficult, without the comforts they were accustomed to, but Clara's presence, alive and safe in his arms, was the greatest luxury he could wish for. The cabin, though humble, represented the hope of a new beginning. Away from Veronica's clutches, the family was reunited, and overcoming each challenge would further strengthen the unbreakable bond between them, a silent testament to the love and resilience that united them, guided by justice and human connection. Arthur, with Clara still asleep in his arms, felt the smell of mold and old wood fill the cabin air. The faint lantern light revealed cobwebs hanging from the ceiling and a thin layer of dust covering everything. The contrast with the luxury of his mansion was stark, but the peace of having Clara safe outweighed any discomfort. He carefully laid her on the dusty sofa, covering her with an old blanket he found in a chest in the corner, a rough fabric, but one that offered some warmth. Clara snuggled in, a soft sigh escaping her lips. Edgar, perched on the window frame, watched Arthur with silent intensity. The raven seemed to understand the need for action. Arthur, with dirty hands and an aching body, began to inspect the place. There was a fireplace, empty but promising warmth. He found some dry firewood and, with some difficulty, managed to light a small fire. The flames danced, casting flickering shadows across the walls and filling the room with comforting warmth. The smell of smoke and burning wood replaced the mold, bringing a sense of home. Clara stirred, her eyes slowly opening. She blinked, confused, before seeing Arthur crouched near the fire. A small smile appeared on her pale face. "Daddy," she called, her voice still weak. Arthur approached, kneeling beside the sofa. "I'm here, my love. We're safe," he said, taking her small hand and kissing it. That touch, that connection, was what he cherished most. He felt a pang of guilt for having exposed her to so much, but the joy of having her back was overwhelming. He found a small pantry with some cans of non-perishable food and bottled water, forgotten from some old visit. It wasn't a feast, but it was enough for the night. Arthur prepared a simple broth, warming it over the fire, and Clara ate slowly, her eyes fixed on the flames. That moment of simplicity, of mutual care, was a balm for their wounded souls. Edgar, high on a beam, seemed to share in the quietness and relief. Meanwhile, in the mansion, Veronica was on the verge of a breakdown. The day had advanced, and her men hadn't found a single trace of Arthur and Clara. Rage mingled with panic. She had underestimated Arthur and the Raven's cunning. "Incompetence!" she shrieked into the phone, her shrill voice echoing through the luxurious corridors. "Search everywhere! He can't have vanished into thin air." She imagined Arthur trying to reach a city, seeking help, and directed her henchmen to bus stops, train stations, and smaller airports. The idea that he would hide in a rustic mountain cabin, a place she didn't even know existed, was completely beyond her comprehension. Her face was marked by deep, dark circles under her eyes and an expression of pure fury. Arthur's fortune, which she considered hers, was slipping through her fingers. The fear of being exposed, of losing everything, drove her to increasingly desperate acts. She ordered her media contacts to start spreading the story of Arthur's disappearance, insinuating that he had fled due to mental problems, a vile attempt to discredit him before he could speak. In the cabin, Arthur watched Clara sleep again, now more peaceful, warmed by the fire. He sat beside her, the rough blanket in his hands, and felt a wave of gratitude for Edgar, the raven who had been his guide and protector. That animal, with its intelligence and loyalty, had revealed the truth and saved his daughter. Arthur knew the battle against Veronica was far from over. But there, in that simple refuge, with Clara safe by his side and Edgar watching, he found the strength to continue. Overcoming obstacles, protecting his family, seeking justice, these were the pillars that sustained him. He stroked Clara's hair, promising himself he would do everything to ensure she had a future of peace and love. The connection between them, father and daughter, and the faithful raven, was his greatest wealth. Arthur woke to the first rays of sun filtering through the cabin's window cracks, painting the packed earth floor with golden stripes. Clara still slept deeply beside him on the sofa, her face serene and her small hands closed. The smell of smoke from the fireplace, now almost extinguished, mingled with the fresh scent of the forest. Edgar, who had spent the night perched on a beam, let out a low caw, like a gentle reminder of the reality that awaited them. Arthur felt the stiffness in his muscles, but the sight of Clara, alive and safe, was a balm for any physical pain. He carefully got up, stretched, and walked to the fireplace to rekindle the fire. The flames danced again, bringing comforting warmth to the room. Clara stirred, her eyes slowly opening. She blinked, her gaze still blurred with sleep, and then a genuine, radiant smile lit up her face upon seeing Arthur. "Daddy!" Her voice, though a little hoarse, was filled with an innocent joy Arthur hadn't heard in a long time. He knelt beside her, embracing her tenderly, feeling her small body nestle against his. "Good morning, my love. Did you sleep well?" Clara nodded, her eyes shining. That moment of pure family connection was the strength Arthur needed to face the day. He knew they couldn't stay there forever. The cabin was a refuge, but also a prison. He needed a plan, a strategy to expose Veronica and ensure Clara's safety permanently. While preparing weak coffee and some porridge with the few supplies he had found, Arthur thought, the news Veronica was spreading about his disappearance with mental problems was a dirty trick, but expected. He needed to counterattack, and he couldn't do that from a mountain hideout. Justice demanded action, and he needed irrefutable and urgent proof. His eyes fell on Edgar, who watched his every move intently. The raven, with its singular intelligence, had been the key to everything. Arthur felt a wave of gratitude, and an idea began to form in his mind. In the mansion, Veronica was in ecstasy and fury. The story she had planted in the media was taking effect. Newspapers and news reports spoke of the reclusive magnate who snapped and fled with his daughter, painting Arthur as an unbalanced man. She felt victorious, even with Arthur and Clara's absence. Her henchmen continued the search, but she directed them to airports and borders, convinced Arthur would try to flee the country. She was so blinded by her ambition that the idea of a simple, forgotten refuge was unimaginable. Veronica planned a press conference for the next day, where she would present herself as the suffering wife, solidifying her image and control over Arthur's fortune. She rehearsed her lines in front of the mirror, a cruel smile on her lips. Back at the cabin, Arthur felt a chill when he turned on the old battery-powered radio he found. The news report's voice confirmed his worst fears, detailing Veronica's narrative. Fury bubbled in his chest, but he transformed it into determination. "She won't win," he murmured, clenching his fists. Edgar cawed loudly. As if agreeing, Arthur looked at Clara, who was drawing on the floor with a piece of charcoal, oblivious to the world's malice. He needed something Veronica valued more than anything, her reputation and the fortune. The cabin had an old landline phone, forgotten and unused for years, but which might be his only bridge to the outside world. An audacious, almost desperate idea began to take shape. He needed evidence, something that could be publicly revealed to expose Veronica once and for all, and he knew exactly where to find them, in her office, at the mansion. The Raven could be the key to this risky mission. Family, justice, and overcoming were at stake, and Arthur was ready for the final confrontation. Arthur knelt beside Clara, his heart heavy with the need to act. "My love, Daddy needs to do something important. You'll be fine with Edgar, right?" Clara nodded, curious eyes fixed on the Raven. Edgar cawed softly, confirming the promise. Arthur kissed his daughter's forehead. It was time. He explained to Edgar, with gestures and an urgent tone, to return to the mansion, to Veronica's office, and retrieve the wooden box with documents, perhaps the confession. Edgar took flight, a dark shadow in the morning sky. Arthur watched him disappear with hope and anguish. That Raven was his only chance. In the mansion, Veronica was preparing for her press conference. She wore an elegant pantsuit, her face made up, rehearsing a sad smile and a compassionate voice. "My poor Arthur, so disturbed," she murmured, confident. The fortune was almost in her hands. Edgar, agile, entered the mansion through a side window. He flew silently to Veronica's office. The wooden box was there, behind books. With his beak, Edgar pulled it, making it fall. The lid opened, revealing papers and a small recorder. Edgar, instinctively, picked up the recorder and took flight, slipping away. Back at the cabin, Arthur paced back and forth, anxiety growing. Clara played with pebbles, oblivious. Then a familiar caw. Edgar. The Raven landed on the window, the recorder in its beak. Arthur ran, taking the object with trembling hands. It was a recorder. He pressed play. Veronica's icy voice filled the cabin, detailing her plan, Clara's location, her intention to manipulate Arthur and usurp his fortune. The truth was unfolding. Arthur felt fury and relief. The proof. He had the proof. With the recorder, Arthur called the landline phone. He dialed Thomas, the lawyer, who was monitoring Veronica's press conference. "Thomas, I have the proof. Connect me to the conference, now." Arthur's voice was firm. Minutes later, Veronica's voice was broadcast live to the press. She spoke of her pain and Arthur's mental fragility. Then Arthur spoke, his voice clear, interrupting her. "Veronica, you are a liar." He placed the recorder next to the mouthpiece, and Veronica's voice, confessing her monstrosity, echoed through the loudspeakers, shocking everyone. Veronica's mask fell. Her face contorted in panic and horror. Reporters turned to her, cameras flashing, questions relentless. The truth had been revealed. Veronica was publicly exposed, her reputation in tatters, her fortune lost. The police, alerted by Thomas, awaited her. Arthur, in the cabin, hung up the phone. feeling the weight of the world lift from his shoulders. He hugged Clara, who looked at him without understanding, but sensing the change in her father's energy. "It's over, my love," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. Edgar, the true hero, landed on Arthur's shoulder, cawing softly, celebrating the victory of justice. The family was finally safe, the bond between father, daughter, and Raven sealed by triumph and love. The journey was arduous, but truth and human connection prevailed. Arthur hung up the phone, the click sound ending the broadcast that exposed Veronica. A heavy silence filled the cabin, but it wasn't the oppressive silence from before. It was a silence of relief, of newfound peace. Clara, still sitting on the floor, looked at him, her large, innocent eyes seeking answers. Arthur pulled her into a tight embrace, feeling her small body tremble slightly. "It's over, my love," he repeated, his voice choked with emotion, tears streaming freely down his face. They weren't tears of sadness, but of profound gratitude and a pain that was finally beginning to dissipate. Edgar, the faithful Raven, landed gently on Arthur's shoulder. His low caw, almost a murmur, seemed like a silent celebration, an acknowledgement of the victory they had achieved together. Arthur stroked the bird's dark feathers, feeling the unbreakable connection that bound them. That raven was not just a pet, he was a family member, a loyal guardian, the true hero who had brought light to the darkness. The days that followed were ones of transition and healing. Thomas, the loyal and tireless lawyer, arranged everything so that Arthur and Clara could return safely. The mansion, once a place of somber opulence, would be transformed. Arthur no longer wanted empty grandeur. He wanted a home, a space filled with laughter and love. Veronica, exposed and without the support of her henchmen, faced justice. Her immeasurable ambition led her to ruin, and she lost everything. The vast fortune she so coveted, the reputation she tried to build on lies, and above all, her freedom. The truth, as Arthur had always known, had an overwhelming power. Arthur, now free from the fabricated mourning and manipulation, dedicated himself entirely to Clara. He was no longer the reclusive magnate, but a present father, affectionate and attentive to his daughter's every need. They spent hours together, reading stories, playing in the garden, or simply sitting in silence, enjoying each other's company. Clara, little by little, regained her joy for life. Her eyes sparkled again, and her smile, once rare and fragile, became frequent and contagious. Memories of captivity still haunted her occasionally, but Arthur's unconditional love and Edgar's constant presence were her greatest comforts. Edgar remained by their side, a silent guardian. He watched Clara with a peculiar tenderness, sometimes landing on her shoulder as she drew, or flying in circles above her as she played. His intelligence and loyalty had changed Arthur's life forever, teaching him that true wealth was not in material possessions, but in bonds of love and trust. The mansion was renovated, gaining lighter colors and more open, light-filled spaces. A new garden was created, where Clara planted colorful flowers, symbolizing the new beginning. Arthur also reconnected with the world, no longer as the cold businessman, but as a man who had learned the value of human connection and resilience. He founded an institution to support children victims of abandonment and neglect, using his fortune to do good, an act of altruism that honored the memory of his own pain and Clara's resilience. The lives of Arthur and Clara, and even Edgar's, became an inspiring testament to the strength of family love. They had faced darkness, betrayal, and pain, but emerged stronger, more united. With each sunset, Arthur watched Clara play with Edgar in the garden, the girl's laughter echoing through the air. He felt a profound peace, immense gratitude. That was his true treasure, a reunited family, unwavering love, and the promise of a future full of hope, guided by justice and unbreakable human connection. The journey had been long and painful, but love, truth, and courage personified in a father, his daughter, and an extraordinary raven had triumphed. The months that followed that day of revelations were a period of profound and significant transformation and healing for Arthur and Clara. The mansion, once a sanctuary of mourning and silence, began to breathe new life. Arthur, freed from the weight of lies and fabricated grief, shed his reclusiveness. His eyes, once somber and distant, now shone with a renewed light, full of affection and attention for his little one. Clara, in turn, blossomed like a flower, finally finding the sun after a long winter. Playtime in the garden became daily, her laughter echoing through corridors that were once silent. She still had her quiet moments, where memories of captivity seemed to linger, but Arthur's firm embrace and Edgar's constant presence were her safe harbors. The raven, ever vigilant, would land on her shoulder as she drew with colourful chalk in the courtyard, or follow her on her little strolls. A winged guardian who never left her alone, Arthur dedicated himself to rebuilding not only Clara's life, but also his own. He sold off some of his less essential businesses, reorganizing his fortune with a new purpose. Far from the blind ambition that once drove him, he now sought a legacy of kindness. He founded a charity dedicated to supporting children who had suffered trauma and neglect, a refuge for small wounded hearts where love and hope were nurtured. It was an act of altruism that healed not only others but also himself, transforming his past pain into a driving force for good. The mansion underwent a significant renovation. Dark colors were replaced by light, vibrant tones. Heavy curtains gave way to light fabrics that allowed abundant sunlight to stream in. Veronica's office was transformed into a playroom and study for Clara, a space of creativity and joy. Veronica, in turn, faced the consequences of her actions. Justice, though slow, was relentless. She lost everything she coveted: fortune, reputation, and freedom, finding a solitary and deserved fate, far from the light and life she tried to destroy. Each day, Arthur watched Clara and Edgar interacting, a spectacle of pure connection. The raven, with its peculiar intelligence, seemed to understand every nuance of the girl, responding to her calls and participating in her games with surprising dedication. That bond between the three was living proof that family was not limited to blood, but to loyalty, care, and unconditional love. Arthur learned that true wealth was not in bank figures or the size of his estate, but in simple moments, in Clara's smiles, in Edgar's cause, and in the peace that finally resided in his heart. He reconnected with old friends, opened himself to new experiences, and found his greatest purpose in fatherhood. Overcoming so many obstacles had forged a stronger, more compassionate, and infinitely happier man. The future, once uncertain and somber, now appeared bright and full of promises. The family, united and resilient, walked side by side, guided by the memory of justice achieved and the unbreakable human connection that had saved them. The story of Arthur, Clara, and Edgar became an inspiring reminder that even in the greatest darkness, true love always finds a way to the light, transforming pain into hope and loss into a new beginning.